2 guarantees. Moving away from a big and old legacy commerce platform to an entirely new approach will transform your customer experiences, drive revenue, and make your teams happy. 2, starting it, let alone doing it, can be bewildering. It will bring challenges, complexity, stress, and fun. So let's talk about selling, not just at the beginning, but during and after each part of the journey. You won't just need to have a great story to influence people at the start. This will be something which we need to reinforce throughout. We IT professionals can traditionally be the most self-limiting group when it comes to the stories we tell and even the language we use. Replatforming. This is probably the most inappropriate word for starters. Moving from a legacy technology of millions of custom lines of code away from one vendor locked-in platform is not in any way a redo. You are not redoing anything. You are doing it like you have never done before in a way that, if done right, should mean you'll never have to redo it again. You're going from legacy, inflexible, unstable, unusable, expensive, manual, slow, unhappy teams to rapid, agile, composable, flexible, best fit for your brand, performant, empowered, autonomous, world-class happy teams. That to me sounds much more like a digital transformation than a replatforming. The main reasons for adopting MACH are centered around the customer, not the technology. A MACH approach enables faster feature development and innovations, more joined up, personalized and localized experiences, and more performant and reliable customer interactions. The benefits on the outside of the picture are still massive hitters in the drivers for taking this on, but too often the journey starts with the technology people underverting the primary triggers of their audience, which are most concerned about their customer. So who doesn't care about MACH? Why should they? How do you convince them? Now, this contains some deliberately light-hearted generalizations here, but what is seriously important is recognizing your pressures and drivers may not align to those you need to inspire. So why don't they get it? Why don't they understand? The only reason why they don't is because you aren't telling the story well enough. I know this because too often I didn't tell the story well enough and I made things harder. So work from the right to the left, strength in numbers, demo, show leadership how hard our team's jobs are or what competitors can do that you can't. Tease out those productivity pain points. Don't say MACH, architecture, under the hood, headless ecosystem and platform. Say new customer capabilities, faster features, more creativity, leaner teams and happier people. So I wanted to home in on 3 big benefits here. So one really being about the smaller teams and becoming more specialized, empowered. So when I look at the teams in my organization who work on the MACH platforms we migrated to, our outcomes are faster, our teams are smaller, our people are happier. And from a technology perspective, the releases, outages, upgrades are all quieter. So oddly, it doesn't get easier. The expectations rise again and we keep going. But if you take an example where we look at some of the benefits that on the side of this is also around the speed of development. So we did a bit of a benchmarking exercise internally where we looked at, so whilst dual running ATG and our new commerce platform, we looked at estimating a new localized payment method via the Adyen gateway. The t-shirt sizes came back and it was like 125 days versus 25. So let's take a second to consider that in a typical modern sizable digital business, like you may want to develop 100 such features a year. That is a phenomenal uplift in speed. I also just want to make sure that we do touch on productivity here as well, because like one of the major barriers of some of the legacy technology is that it's a huge bottleneck on people's ability to do their day jobs. So that means that like creative people, marketeers, merchandisers, instead of thinking about positioning the products or the brand or the messaging or the inspirational content they're trying to personalize across the audience in your customer base, they're spending all this time with like raising IT tickets and just to move some content from one cell to another. So what I've seen is that an example of digital asset management, the process of approving assets and workflowing them from like 12 minutes to under 60 seconds. In our legacy content management platform, there were like 40 tickets a day being raised just to move content around. And we used to measure the clicks and to build these stories up around just how much these improved the lives of our teams. So let's talk a little bit about the minefield that can be identifying and selecting new replacement platforms. Now, if your search platform will drive you plus 4 million conversion, get on with it. MACH is more flexible. So if you do make a less than perfect choice and you have to build things and you have built things the right way, then you should be able to pivot later on anyway, and probably more painlessly than ever before. So these are the typical capabilities that you should and may recognize in a modern digital commerce business. However, the importance of each will obviously be very unique to you and your organization. Now, there are many others, and from fraud to tax to returns, notifications, translations, copy, workflow. But I guess this represents, when you think about commerce, it really is, traditional commerce platforms tend to be a bit of a mix of content, commerce, search, and payment, but depending on what you've got and where you're going to. So I want to now just quickly cover 3 pitfalls when selecting the technology that drives these capabilities. There are 601 cloud SaaS web-based CMSs on Capterra's website. How do you know which ones are truly microservices, API first, cloud, and headless? Firstly, seek advice. The MACH Alliance, or recognition of composable commerce as terms, were not in existence until recently. So when I started my journey with MACH, most of the platforms that were chosen were at best in the emerging quadrants, which was a bit of a leap of faith to some degree for our organization. So how do you select well? Well, thankfully today there is more resource and more recognition that this approach is not really new anymore, but very much the mainstream. So the MACH Alliance does give a great landing point of reference to shortlist different technologies, or maybe refine and research your principles for selection. So start there, and having certainty and certification matters. It's no different than when you're replacing your boiler or your electrics. You want to know that what you're getting is safe and the real deal. So that said, there are some brilliant options out there that may fail on 1 or even 2 MACH principles that still may play a majorly exciting role in your technology landscape and your organization. So stay open-minded along the way. And finally, engage with other aspirational and relevant brands to yourself. Take reference calls, listen to podcasts. The amount of free consultancy available these days is better than ever. So if it wasn't disorientating enough to, at least on face value, feel like the marketplace is just saturated with options, this is amplified by the ones that play in multiple areas. So a bit of a quick story, but we were looking at our DAM capability. We got down from 5 to 2 and then 1, and we were like, amazing, we've nailed it. This DAM is 10 out of 10 for our needs. Felt really confident about it. And then just paused and pivoted for a second and started looking at CMS. And suddenly, this completely mind-boggling scenario had emerged where we suddenly realized that the CMSs we want also came with the DAM, or maybe even a PIM or a CDN. And this got really confusing, because it was then a case of like, well, do we want like an 8 out of 10 DAM and then a 10 out of 10 CMS? Our principle was that we really wanted the best in each category. So when technologies start to play in multiple areas, they tend to have typically emerged from a core capability and kind of grown into other areas. And there's pros and cons to that, and I want to give them both service, but it does make the process of kind of composing your commerce platforms together quite further complicated. So calling it like the one-to-many approach, that really the benefits of having 1 or 2 main platforms covering each of those capabilities in that earlier diagram is, I do believe you may well get some speed of overall migration. You've got less RFPs, less selection, probably less integration points. And the other key thing to mention is you've probably also got 1 or 2 maximum places for your teams to work in. And that may also help them and be more an efficient way of working than having 5 or 6 different places to do their jobs. But there are cons, and they're really called out in the pros of the right-hand approach. Now, by just looking at a 1 capability to 1 technology approach, then you do have that full flexibility to go and get your 10 out of 10 commerce your 10 out of 10 DAM, your 10 out of 10 search, or rather than say the best, what I would call the right capabilities. Because it's very much dependent on your business. You may not need a world-class commerce platform. In luxury businesses, you tend to find that there's very few promotions, there's very small amount of volumes, there's not huge range of products. So some of the complexities of commerce, which you'll see in a grocery or homeware store, are just not there. So why go and over-index on a commerce platform when you can invest in perhaps some of the more inspirational, experiential type technologies in other capabilities? I think the other really key thing here is that you will also get that true future flexibility. You want to be in a position, both in how you've built things and what you've chosen, where it's not a big deal to redo things in the future, to pivot in a different direction and get the latest, greatest next thing. If one of the outputs of your RFP is a 50-page document, you're wasting everybody's time. If in doubt, demo. If unsure, hack. Share your principles. You do an agile RFP. Share your principles, your goals, your needs and pain points, and ask in a maximum of a week for the technology companies to come back and present. This keeps things lean and light from their perspective. Make sure everybody has the same fair conditions, same environment to succeed in. And if you don't get all the answers in that one session, just be agile about it. Regroup. Home in on that specific use case that you don't understand or you want them to prove. Even better, get them to show you it in their technology in a real example. Let your engineers get hands-on as well. Engineers are the most underrated and overlooked part of the decision forum. Giving your developers access to the technology dispels any of the myths around the sales presentations, and by seeing how different vendors tackle the same objective, you can see which is a good match for your organization. So, 4 simple assessment principles. I covered this a lot about capability early on. So regarding the others, I think on the technology side, just make sure the technology works for your business. There's no point having a world-class commerce platform that won't integrate easily, or you lack the engineering skills to build it quickly enough, or it won't perform in a remote but important market. On the cost side, I think normally when people are questioning the cost, what they're actually questioning is the value. So really home in on what the value of that platform is, but also crucially understand what's the total cost of all of the platforms that you glued together, because that needs to be compared versus a 1 or 2 vendor proposition, and make sure that you're seeing that efficiency come through there. And finally, on partnership, which is just so important, test the roadmap. Will they share it? Can you influence it? If companies don't want to show you their roadmap or how it works, then it's probably not what you think. Get those demos in as well. It's not just a sign that the technology is fit for purpose, but it's also a great way of testing that the openness and the kind of collective collaboration of the 2 organizations with you and the technology partner. And above all, never select without a rounded group of skills, users, and technologists in the room. Change management should start on day 1. So sequencing is very important, but you don't have to lay out the entire roadmap in the beginning. Get the principles right and back yourself to get 1 or 2 things progressing. Things will change both at a macro and micro level, but equally be careful not to bite off too much. I certainly underestimated how big a job handling even multiple lean RFPs, procurement, legal, contracts, and then especially the scaling of new engineering teams all at once, which is really difficult in a competitive engineering market. So how do we decide what to start with? So my advice would be to just start ruthlessly with, is it valuable? Is it difficult? Create momentum. Start with the high value, lowest complex items first. Get some runs on the board and earn trust and celebrate. Identify where the new customer innovations are and drive them early. That said, you may have more burning technology or commercial reasons to forcibly get off a specific part of your legacy platform. So consider the tech motives thoroughly also. So let's think about usability as well here. Can you imagine that you're a content manager and you've got this amazing new platform early? It's rolled out for a section of your front end and website just to manage the content on the homepage. Now, that means everything else is being managed from the legacy system. And working in a hybrid between the old and new platforms would be fine for a short period as a teaser. But if it goes on for a prolonged timeline, it's quite disruptive to people's role, as well as being quite frustrating when you've seen what great looks like. Spend time with your teams that use these platforms, listen to them, support them, negotiate them with them, influence and empathize. Find those compromises, and you're much more likely to find them if it's the same group of individuals that you involved in the selection at the beginning. So it's really important to be having a really honest conversation when you go into this with yourselves about your execution ability. So, with the organization I worked with, we never set out to do this at record speed. We set out to do it to fast track the customer benefits, minimize disruption to our existing business, and by removing the legacy technology at appropriate, safe-sized chunks. But before you go with the MACH roadmap, you do need to have a really honest word with yourself about that maturity of your organization. If there is a huge cultural void between IT and the business, or there isn't a good foundation of modern engineering practices like automation, DevOps, agile, then you may struggle. So be aware of those demands and those needs of your dependent teams as well. And make sure that the functions like finance, HR, legal are all brought along from the beginning. So the reason I'll only share one slide on succeeding is because it would be very arrogant of me to go on about success when in reality, every organization is unique, and my unique cocktail of victories and failures may not apply to you or elsewhere. So instead, I'll use this chance to briefly summarize some of the key points and then share and take some questions. So make the transformation human. Be thankful. Appreciate everyone who makes an impact on this journey. You're in the position of such influence because someone appreciated you before now. So get this as a big opportunity for your teams and colleagues to learn, grow, and succeed. Sell the story from a customer-centric point of view. Your customer, your teams, your technology, always in that order. Select together. So if you join up as one team in the beginning, change management is zero concern at the end. If we get momentum by delivering customer value, then people are going to trust us to continue the journey. It helps secure further investment, that there's going to be confidence in our execution, and that we get to front load those benefits to show that this isn't that old way of doing things, where with technology where you have to wait 2 years before a customer or our teams enjoys these tools. Embrace the balance between core migration. So unless your entire migration can be done in 90 days or you're a brand new organization, then there will be many great ideas and pressing innovations that will need to be done in year to drive short-term revenue. And you'll need to support, understand, and build them potentially in your legacy platform. So that will create like a moving of the goalposts along the way. And that's a really important thing to be aware of and to think about in how you set up your governance and how you listen to those different ideas that come up along the way. So get lean. Product managers are vital to helping ship early incremental value. And finally, don't take things too seriously. Whatever the ups and downs are, you'll be leaving a huge legacy on your organization by doing this digital transformation and by not replatforming. So thanks for listening to my talk today. It's been fantastic to be part of something so impactful and in the company of such smart people today. So I'll be happy to take some questions before we close.
Giles, we are the lucky ones to have you here as being part of something this impactful, as you say. Thank you for staying for a quick Q&A. I have a long question, so I'm going to read this. On the one-to-one sorry?
All good, yeah.
Okay, good. Sorry. On the one-to-one approach, don't you get the remark from the actual users, like product managers, content managers, etc.? They lose time because they need to go to all these different systems for each task and often no longer have a clear view which tool is used for what.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I mean, I want to give color to this question without whilst acknowledging that every organization is unique and different. And so whatever you're replatforming will be a different blend of existing technologies. Now, in my experience where I work, we had a PIM platform that did some capabilities. We had a new search platform where people were starting to do new merchandising capabilities. as well as some of the old ones. So it was a risk we raised very early on. And I guess in simple answer, in principle, yes, if you've got one tool to do your job, that's going to be a little bit easier than 6 or 7 or 4 or 5. I think that's true. But I think you can, equally, if you want to have the best in class tools in each capability, then that's the trade-off, which in my opinion, I have a preference for. But there's definitely some work to be done. What we did is we brought in a couple of lead BAs to really look at the business processes and stitch them together prior to like attacking the implementation of each of these things. So we looked at, well, hold on, how can we minimize that impact? So at least if they're using, say, a DAM and the content platform, could we do it so that they start core parts of their processes in the DAM and then it ends in the content platform without going back forward to search, in some sort of really convoluted way. So it's probably worth having a bit of investment into getting someone to look through that journey from the user's perspective and how the different platforms work for each other, because that actually drove us to then build some functionality into our PIM that didn't exist before, where that became the single coordination piece of a lot of like previewing and other important tasks. So, as I said, it's hard to tell the world what to do when it's so unique to your organization. But I tried in the presentation to give due diligence to both approaches because I think there's merits to both.
How much, going from there a bit more technical, how much orchestration do you see being required between the old and the new stacks, e.g. sharing customer basket, etc.? Or do you think a one-off migration is preferred actually?
Oh, wow, what a question. I'd love to do the same thing all over and try the one-off and see the pros and cons. And I think that undoubtedly, although we all fear the word big bang for good reasons these days, I think undoubtedly there are strengths to that process. I think I briefly touched on in the presentation in that the point I was trying to make is that by having some regions on ATG and some regions on a new platform like Commerce Tools, you by default is fine for weeks, maybe months, but soon if you've got merchandisers and teams that are working in both platforms, that becomes very disruptive. And even worse when you've seen what great looks like and you're also struggling in the old technology to do the other part of your job or manage a different region or whatever the unique scenario is. So it is really difficult. And we had examples where we, on the generally speaking, I've approached it in an agile incremental way, the kind of strangling vine approach that people refer to in the architecture world. However, there were examples where we talked to the business team and said, look, we got 2 options. Option A, we deliver some of the features in the DAM now, and you get half the DAM with half of the images we need for our website, but you'll have to dual work in both the old and the new for 3 to 4 months. Or you wait 3 or 4 months and we launch it all in a much more condensed period of a few weeks. And on that occasion, they chose the latter. There wasn't the same urgency, there wasn't the same risk profile with what they were doing. There was big events going on in our business calendar. So it was just, again, it's about bringing those people into that conversation and saying, here's 2 options, our recommendation is this, but if you want to go this way, we'll support it. And I think that in the detail of the whole roadmap, we did both at different points.
You said a couple of minutes ago that I don't know exactly. If you want to look at something, you demo. If you're in doubt, you hack it. Something like this. How do you overcome the organizational inertia to MACH? Is one of the questions that I got. The perception is that you need a highly skilled team with like top-notch capabilities to deliver MACH, which probably aren't easy to find in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about the story that I shared today is it was sort of 2-3 years ago where we began the journey, and even MACH, as I mentioned, wasn't a term or an organization that was embodied, and I think it's a fantastic thing that it's come together. But so there was probably more, it was seen as more radical at the time for our organization to not go with some more traditional monolith type platforms. We overcame that, I guess, but I think where the process of hacking the software and looking at, we had some use cases where we truly, I think it was more about bringing the engineers into the assessment as well. Often it's kind of like in a best case scenario, you've got some key business users and some sort of delivery people in a room, but the engineers are the guys who will enable this to be a really complicated or a really simple like journey. I don't think it's necessarily about the skills, because in some of the MACH principles mean that you could pick what language you write in or what architecture approach you take, what tools you use for your CI/CD process, it's actually more flexible. But you need to be, I think, very aware of what the depth of that resource is in the marketplace. I think that's one of the biggest challenges across a whole of IT right now, is about the scalability and the demand in the digital world for like Key, React, Java, and Angular, whatever your default is in an organization. That's something that I think is becoming a risk for a lot of any retailer right now, is that we've got all this ambition to like drive digital capabilities, but yeah, the industry it's a real competition because there's quite scarcity of those resources. So I think that for me is my bigger concern at the moment. And
you definitely seem to be hitting a nerve, Giles. If I'm reading the comments correctly, I'm not entirely sure if people just want to have your slides to talk to their own business stakeholders, or if they just want to have you, because you certainly delivered an important message today, which obviously is that this is not just a tech topic. It's much, much more. You need buy-in, you need way more people, right?
Yeah, and I think to finish on, I mean, it's also about the partnership side, which I mentioned in the talk. I mean, for me, like, we wanted to make sure we got the right technology. We want to make sure we've got the right capabilities for our ambition. But like, if you don't have great partnership and relationships with you're trusting your whole business with these new innovative SaaS platforms. So, it's just as important to be a great customer in this dynamic, that you drive the right relationship with organizations like yourselves and others, and get that sense of like collective achievement and responsibility for like the things that are now being powered. Like, so I think that for me, above all, having really strong partnerships where everyone takes accountability for the bad days, they don't yell at each other, you really celebrate the good days. That's the other shift I've seen through a lot of these MACH providers, is actually how they engage with the customer is more empathetic, it's more honest, it's more authentic. And in my day job, honestly, that goes as far as the technology does to make things a lot easier.
May I take that as a compliment?
Certainly can, Helga.
All right, Giles, thank you so much for today. I think this was absolutely brilliant.
Brilliant. Thanks. Enjoy the day. Thank you for having me.
We will. Thanks, Giles.